There are silences that grow old with us. They don't scream, don't demand, don't show up in old photos, but they're still there, sitting beside us during coffee, sleeping on the pillow next to ours, whispering in moments when no one else is around. One day, someone left. And with that departure, a phrase was left unsaid. It wasn't anything complicated or grand. Maybe just a "forgive me" or an "I understand you now." But time, that silent sculptor, turned that small, undone gesture into a rock in the chest. And what was just a delay became absence. And what was just pride became emotional grief. I know it's not easy to talk about this. A lot of people turn away when the topic comes up. But it's not because they don't feel. It's precisely because they feel too much. Because it hurts to remember. It hurts to admit the conversation never happened. It hurts to imagine what might have changed if courage had arrived before the end. When my father passed, I carried with me everything I never had the courage to say. And it wasn't because I didn't love him. It was because I didn't know how to love with words. It was because fear of being misunderstood, of seeming weak, of opening wounds, spoke louder. But today I understand. What hurts is not just what was said. It's what was suffocated for too long. Maybe you carry one of those silences too. Maybe you left a story unfinished, a door left ajar, an incomplete gesture. And now, years later, that silence has become company. A company that weighs on you, that tightens your chest when everything should feel light. But here's a truth few have the courage to say: not every silence is a choice. Many were survival. You did what you could, with what you knew. At the time it happened. But today you know more. Today you feel more. Today you have something you may never have had: awareness. And with awareness comes a chance, not to change the past, but to rewrite the present because of it. Kicker. What if what was left unsaid in that conversation is still possible to say, even if only to yourself? This isn't a story about regret. It's a story about reconnection. With the other, yes, but mainly with who you were when you went silent, and with who you can be now if you choose to speak, even if in silence, to speak with your heart, to speak with courage, because maybe you don't need more time. Maybe you just need more courage. Pride has a strange way of staying intact, even when almost everything around us has already changed. It doesn't feel the weight of the years. It doesn't miss anyone. It doesn't lose sleep. We do. On the outside, it seems steady, strong, even dignified. On the inside, it's made of fear. Fear of getting hurt again. Fear of seeming small. Fear of opening up and not being embraced. The truth is that pride is often just pain dressed in armor. The pain that hasn't yet found a safe space to come out. The pain that doesn't want to admit it misses. That it feels longing. That it feels guilt. As the years go by, we start to realize the fights that once felt so justified no longer make sense. The harsh words, the withdrawn gestures, the chosen silence, all of that ages. But the affection that wasn't lived, that doesn't age, it only falls silent. And when we realize it, we're alone, with our reasons, but without a hug, with our pride, but without peace. How many connections were lost, not because there was no love, but because there wasn't enough courage to lower our guard? The hardest thing to realize is that sometimes we win the argument, but lose the person. And that, with maturity, weighs differently. After 50, the soul asks for less victory and more truth, less reason and more reconciliation, less defenses and more presence, because there's no more time to waste with trenches that only push us further from those who once meant so much. There's a silent, but transformative, gesture that can start to heal that pride, to write what was never said, to give form to the words that fear swallowed, to make space for what has been locked away for so long. You don't need to give that letter to anyone. It's not for the other. It's for you. It's a way to let your pride rest, to say with a trembling hand and a silent heart, I made mistakes too. I felt too. I wish I could go back, even just a little. And if you can't go back, then at least move forward without carrying so much weight. Because pride may grow old with us, but it doesn't have to grow old inside us. It doesn't knock at the door. It simply walks in. It sits beside us on seemingly peaceful days. It shows up in the middle of an ordinary memory, in an old photograph, in a scent that drifts through the kitchen. Guilt, after 50, no longer comes with fury. It comes with silence. A kind of silence that tightens the chest, that asks questions with no answers. That makes us look back and wonder, why didn't I speak sooner? Did he know that I loved him? Did she feel how much I cared? These thoughts don't scream, but they persist. They live deep in the mind and return each time loneliness lies down beside us. Guilt has a curious way of disguising itself as longing, and sometimes we spend years mourning not just the absence of the other, but what we failed to live while the other was still here. It's not the big gestures that haunt us, it's the small ones. The conversations postponed, the forgiveness left unspoken, the affection withheld out of shame, hurt, or exhaustion. And when there's no longer a way to apologize directly, what remains is this emptiness, this absence of what was never said. But there are subtle ways to heal what time hasn't. Not everything needs an answer, but some things need reconciliation, even if only internal, to transform guilt into a gesture, to give it form, to offer something to life in the name of what we couldn't offer in the past. Some people find relief by planting something, a tree, a flower, a symbol, a way of saying, I haven't forgotten, but I choose to transform. Because in the end, what hurts isn't just what was lost, it's what remained formless. It's what stayed trapped inside us for so long, waiting for a safe space to be remembered with compassion, not with pain. And even if the past cannot be touched, the present can be nurtured with tenderness, with respect for the life lived, with the wisdom of someone who has understood that guilt, on its own, leads nowhere, but that when embraced with courage, it can lead us back to ourselves. There's a confusion that follows many people for decades. The idea that forgiving means saying what happened was acceptable, as if forgiveness were some kind of absolution, when in fact, it is liberation. Liberation from emotional repetition. Liberation from the exhaustion of always carrying the same name, the same event, the same weight. Liberation from oneself. From that place where resentment froze us in time. Resentment that is kept does not age. It seeps in, into the body, into gestures, into the way we breathe when we talk about the past. That's why, after 50, so many people feel that something still hurts, but they don't know exactly what it is. It's not the memory, it's the accumulation. It's the internal repetition of a scene that the brain didn't know how to end. Because when the soul can't find space to close a wound, the body holds it. Stored pain turns into tension, into a weight that doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, from stiffened shoulders, from sleepless nights, from a fatigue that has no explanation. And that's when forgiveness becomes an act of care, not necessarily for the other, but for oneself. It's not about forgetting, nor about erasing what was lived, but about opening a new space inside. A space where there's no longer the same tightness, the same quiet anger, the same sense of injustice that keeps us trapped in what has already happened. To forgive is to say, I don't agree with what was done, but I choose not to live under its rule anymore. It's accepting that there won't be another version of that story, and still moving forward with what is. And for that, there's no need to rush. But there is a need for presence. 5 minutes. Every day. In silence. Not the silence of pride, but the silence of listening. That intimate moment when you close your eyes and let come what needs to be heard by you, without judgment, without pressure, just the honest listening of the pain you carried for years, without name, without voice, without rest, because forgiveness, before being a moral choice, is an emotional necessity. And perhaps it is also a spiritual invitation for you to once again occupy, with lightness, the space that resentment held for so long. This is the beginning of a peace that doesn't depend on anyone else, a peace that is born within, and that blossoms when courage finally arrives. Death ends presences, but it doesn't end stories. It interrupts embraces, but it doesn't completely silence what remained between two souls. There are bonds that keep pulsing even after the final goodbye, because love, guilt, unexpressed affection, all of it remains in different forms in places where time can still reach. Many believe that dialogue ends with physical absence. But there's another kind of conversation, the one that happens in the invisible space of memory, in the words whispered in thought, in the tears that fall during a solitary prayer. It's in that place, between silence and longing, that time can still heal, not as someone who fixes what was broken, but as someone who gives new meaning to what once seemed lost. Some people write letters, others visit places, others simply sit at the edge of the bed and close their eyes, saying what was left unsaid while it was still possible. It's not fantasy, it's emotional reconnection. It's the heart saying, I still feel, I still need to complete this sentence. I need this story to end, even if it's just within me. There are those who made peace with their mother after 40 years of silence. Those who said, I forgive you, Dad, at 70 after a lifetime of absence, and those who reunited with a brother who's already gone through the simple gesture of welcoming the pain that was once denied. Life doesn't give us all the reunions we'd like, but it offers us a delicate power, the power to reinterpret, to return to that memory with a new perspective, to understand now what once seemed incomprehensible. Maybe the other never knew what you longed to hear. Maybe they didn't have the tools to give you what you needed. But maybe, just maybe, you can say now, even if only in thought, I understand you. Today I see what once blinded me. And in that moment, something settles inside. It's not magic, it's emotional maturity. Because when pain finds acceptance, it doesn't scream anymore. It breathes. It transforms into a pacified memory. And even after death, there are paths back. Not to change the ending, but to finally move on in peace with everything you've lived. There are pains that don't end with us. They get passed on, not because we want them to, but because we didn't know how to deal with them. That's how silence between generations takes hold, like an ancient echo repeating itself in our current relationships. Sometimes, without even realizing it, we speak to our children with the same coldness that once hurt us. Or we expect from our grandchildren the attention we never received from our parents. When we don't forgive, we project. The distant gaze, the restrained gesture, the fear of showing vulnerability. All of this gets passed down as an invisible inheritance, and what was once a wound becomes a pattern. Have you ever asked yourself which phrases you never heard, and therefore never learned how to say? Maybe it was a missing, I trust you, or a simple, you're not alone. And because you never heard those words, you learned to silence them too. But something changes when awareness arrives, when we stop to observe that our way of loving was shaped by absences, when we recognize that what we're repeating is not who we are, but what we learned to do to survive. And that's where the cycle can be interrupted, not with grand speeches, but with small, yet wholehearted gestures. A touch on the arm, a moment of listening without judgment, a look that says, I'm really here. These actions break the chain of what caused pain, because there's no hurt that can withstand sincere presence, and there's no silence that can't be softened by honest listening. Little by little, relationships transform, not perfectly, but genuinely, more human, lighter, more possible. You don't need to rewrite your parents' story, but you can offer a new story to those who came after, and perhaps that is one of the most profound legacies of maturity, the courage to feel, so that those we love don't have to repeat. Imagine a field. Somewhere in it, there's a fallen tree. It collapsed over the years. It carried stories, memories, deep roots. But it fell, and there's no way to stand it back up. You can sit beside that trunk and grieve the time that was lost. And maybe you need to do that for a while. But at some point, you'll realize that there's fertile soil all around, and that your hands can still plant. The tree of the past has fallen, but that doesn't mean everything is over. It simply means that the time of waiting is over. The time of postponing, of swallowing words, of carrying silences as if they were part of who you are. There's a phrase you might need to say, even today. I want to talk. It could be with someone who's still here. It could be with someone who's already gone. Or it could be with yourself, with the part of you that stayed frozen in time, trying to understand where everything changed. You don't need more time. Time is here. What you need is more courage. Courage to open your chest, to see yourself honestly, to recognize that life isn't over, but that the way you live it might need to change. After 50, the body asks for silence, but the soul still whispers, "Listen to me, see me, let me live again." You can still start over. You can still reconcile with what wasn't. You can still give a new name to what once hurt, and now asks for peace. To forgive is to say to yourself, "I deserve to move on in peace." And moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means walking more lightly. It means finally making space for other things to bloom. It means living what there's still time to live. And there's plenty. So, if today you still have time, use it. Not in a rush, not in fear, but with presence. Because maybe when it comes down to it, what was always missing wasn't time, it was courage.